Next on Rugby Wrap-Up, Steve Lewis, Bryan Ray, and Matt McCarthy with Major League Rugby analysis and previews that you do not want to miss. Rugby Wrap-Up brought to you in part by The Pig and Whistle, the world's best rugby pub. The Murphy Kennedy Group, founded with the idea that construction can be done better. And Lean and Limber, stretching your way to a healthier lifestyle. And we are back on Rugby Wrap-Up. Matt McCarthy, Steve Lewis, and Bryan Ray talking Major League Rugby. Here's our analysis segment, and we have a beaming Bryan Ray in front of his Toronto Arrows backdrop because his team won. Otherwise, he'd be rooting for the other team. Bryan, take us back to Toronto on the road, winning, getting that first win, 40-19. Overall glory.
Just tears of joy watching that match. From the get-go, it looked like the rest was gone. This is the Arrows that we knew that we were expecting this season, making a mess of the breakdown, good line speed, running simple but effective patterns going forward, creating line breaks, not really trying to force stuff. It's just a fantastic performance all around. A couple little nitpicky things you can find here or there, but so good to see, and an awesome win.
And Stephen, we talked to Lucas Rumball, the captain, and he's a youngish guy, 25, but you brought up a very good point in that conversation, how the MLR is really going to benefit Team Canada because they have all these guys on one team for the Arrows, and that front row of Team Canada of the Arrows last week, they were an average age of 23, and that's only going to make that front row better.
I think a factor in the success of most international teams is something that's referred to as cohesion, right? They tend to draw from, 2 or 3 club teams, the core of their team. So if they're getting reps together, week in, week out practice, they're playing together, they know each other, it can certainly, having even 50, 60% of the Canadian squad with Toronto is a fantastic thing for Canadian rugby.
And Bryan, the downside or the upside of them being together during this whole COVID thing is the bonding.
Yeah, these guys are tight, but the Canadian players in general, a lot of them have played together coming up through age grade, the U20 system within their province. So they all know each other, either playing against each other or playing with each other anyways. There aren't too many guys who are going to come into the team who are really, who's this guy? We've never heard of him before. So I think that cohesion in general is probably, a strength of Canadian rugby, but obviously we need a little bit more to be successful at international level.
And on the Old Glory side, they had youth in that match as well. The 2 wings, Cusano and Devontae Noble, and the fly half, Mike DeBullis, who may have struggled at times.
So those are all top-notch collegiate players over the last couple of years. I actually coached them all All-American Sevens, Kutztown, Penn State, and Cal, right? 3 good programs. So big step up for them, particularly for Dabulus in the pivot spot at 10. It's a big responsibility. Baptism of fire. He said some good clock previous couple of weeks in other roles at 15 and what have you. But that was a big burden on his shoulders last week and a tough game for him.
Next one up, Utah Warriors went into New England Free Jacks home opener at Union Point Stadium and came up just short, Steve.
Yes, obviously a historic game for the New England Free Jacks franchise, right? It was their first year last year. They were playing on the road, and then, as we know, COVID hit. So they never got to play that home game. You and I went up there, did a bit of commentary, right? A couple of years back, did that Cara Cup thing at that particular ground in Weymouth. And there was a good thing building. It's a passionate rugby area. League needs a strong Boston team. So for them to get a win on their home opener, it's good for them. It's good for them. Good for the league. Utah came back late and almost pipped them, 22-21. But I think away wins are going to be worth their weight in gold. They're pretty hard to get. People underestimate, particularly with the COVID protocols, the added hardship and hassle of traveling.
And you would know this because you are the general manager of the New York franchise. Bryan, you are a stats guy, a trivia guy, and a savant, really, when it comes to Major League Rugby and all rugby. Who scored the first ever try in a regular season Major League Rugby game? Stephen, you're not allowed to answer this, at Union Point Stadium in the home opener.
Josh Whippy.
Oh, you're good. Who got the first penalty goal?
Baudin Waka.
Ah, he's 2 for 2, and we'll move on. We're not going to stump him. Brian, your thoughts on that match?
Yeah, great entertaining match. We've talked about Utah being an 80-minute team. Well, they weren't in this game, but the problem wasn't the end of the game or the beginning of the game. Is a 20-minute chunk right in the middle where they kind of let the Free Jacks run rampant. So they'll have to iron that out. Took some silly penalties in there. It's fixable, but just delighted that they finally got a game in Boston. And, it'll be really something to see once we get this COVID thing over with and we can have a full stands in there to enjoy it.
And Utah, again, showing, and I'm going to beat this dead horse, they're showing they're not a 60-minute team. They came back, scored in extra time. It's always a good sign, especially on the road, right? But great day for rugby up there in New England. Happy for the Free Jacks to get that win. San Diego Legion at Rugby ATL. I thought San Diego was on the up and up. They were starting to get their stuff together. But then it was 15-15, and then the floodgates opened, and the Rattlers just decimated them. And Steve,
I think it was little reported. San Diego had a bit of food poisoning trouble, so 3 or 4 guys didn't make the trip. It's just a fact. But yeah, it was a surprising result, right? You've got a very well coached, well organized young Atlanta team, and they're going to be a force in this league. It's just a matter of when. But I was surprised by that result myself, by the nature of and the margin.
Brian, what did you take away from that match?
Yeah, I think what we've seen from San Diego this season has been pretty consistent so far in that we've seen these individual moments of brilliance. Sam Wuching, another ridiculous line, scores a fantastic try, and then just, nothing happens for a bit. I think John Cullen was saying, I heard him talking about them playing like a bunch of individuals rather than a team, and I think that's pretty accurate right now. They got some incredible talent. They're just not gelling at the moment. In that, we talked about cohesion. It's just not happening for San Diego right now.
And I don't know if he was part of that food poisoning bunch that missed the game, but Nate Augsburger was out, and he's a key component to that San Diego franchise as well. Houston SaberCats in the Texas Two-Step Cup went into Austin, and the Gogronis smoked them, Brian.
Yeah, really disappointing from a Houston perspective. For Austin, I guess we'll start there. They're just, they're starting to look better. They're still missing some bodies. They weren't quite their full component, but they got their set pieces a bit more accurate this week. Couple driving balls in for tries earlier. Credits to Mason Koch for those couple scores. It only his third game as a professional. That's pretty impressive. But Houston, they're almost an entirely rejigged backline this week. So, just not really firing there, missing some, but they really missed DeVet Roos. You talked about Augsburger with San Diego. DeVet Roos is the heart and soul of that team. Now they're getting Nick Boyer. That's going to help them. They couldn't quite get him in for the game this past weekend. That would have helped, but DeVet Roos is so important to that side. So, I'm not sure when he's coming back or what, but they're going to have to find something real soon.
Yeah, they picked up Boyer in that cap clearing trade with the Giltinis, Steve.
They did. Yep. Poor old Phil has bounced around, right? He's gone from Glendale to Dallas to LA to Houston. The life of a professional rugby player.
Long hair, short hair, you name it, he's had it. We'll look to see how he impacts that team. But, wow, the SaberCats, 2 consecutive bad losses. What is the nature of the beast in trading in Major League Rugby as opposed to other professional sports where if you're going for a playoff push, you're a buyer and maybe you're a seller if you're not? Is that component going to play into this league, do you think?
Yeah, but it's way early. If you're trading players now, you didn't get it right beginning of the season, preseason, right? You didn't get the right squad. I mean, what do you look, when do you trade? You get a run of injuries, you're struggling, or perhaps, you are going for that playoff push. You're also constrained by what you've already spent if you are, observing a salary cap. So there's that limitation on you. You might not have any room to trade even if you want to, and there may not be any need. Like, for instance, we're pretty comfortable with our squad right now. If we got 2 injuries at scrum half, you got to make a move. So it's early to think about it, but it's usually driven by injury or potentially driven by a bad run of results. We need to switch things up, maybe a different couple of voices in the dressing room. Who knows?
Dumb question, but if you're at the cap and you have 2 injuries, are you allowed to put those players on an injured list and bring in other players and technically be over the cap?
Yeah, it hasn't happened to me yet, so I haven't done the details, but I think if it's a season-ending injury, you can claw back, I believe it's like 60, 70% of what the contract was. But you've got to go into the season having given yourself some buffer space. Injuries are coming. You know you're going to have to get in a couple of APC guys. So you've got to keep a little bit of space there. And if you haven't done it, you haven't really done your job.
Brian, your Arrows are the team that has to struggle the most during this, the lack of flexibility on getting pplayers in and out of there.
Yeah, so it's not a cap problem with Toronto. It's a problem of a border and quarantine. We saw it with the Argentine duo, Tukule and Montero. They had to go through quarantine. They were only available a few days before the first game, so they didn't end up playing them. But, this past weekend had to get Liam Murray in from Houston because a couple front row injuries. So, that's a tough one for them. You can't just call in Rob Brower and have him down, the next day, which is, just disappointing, but that's just the way it is. So, just going to have to deal with it for the rest of the season.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's take a quick break and come back with previews for next week. We'll be right back.
If you're in New York City and want to watch some great rugby, have some great food, and some great times, go to the world's best rugby pub, the Pig and Whistle on West 36th Street.
Been blind since I was 4. And I've never seen a beer commercial or a beer label. None of that stuff influences me. I drink beer because of the taste. And my beer's Pabst Blue Ribbon. It has the taste and the flavor.
What do you think's on the label?
I think there's a naked woman riding on a unicorn, jumping over fire. Oh, that's good beer.
We're back. Bryan Ray, Steve Lewis, and Matt McCarthy talking Major League Rugby. We talked about what happened last week. Let's talk about what's in front of us. We have the LA Giltinis on the road for the first time out of the friendly confines of the Coliseum in Los Angeles, and they're going into Toronto. No, they're not. Old joke, I know, but it just underscores the problem. They're going into NOLA to play Toronto, Brian.
Yeah, so essentially a neutral venue for both. I think the past week has been good for both teams, probably. Toronto getting a bit of momentum, getting a big win, getting some confidence back. And the Giltinis, or LA, I guess I should just stick with that, getting a little bit a week to kind of rest some bumps and bruises from the early bits of the season. I know Bill Meeks had a banged up shoulder. Now, they probably wish that bye was a little bit later in the season, but there it is. I think this is an awesome contest, and I'm picking the Arrows to upset the apple cart and beat these Galacticos, as Mr. Lewis likes to call them.
If that doesn't happen, are you going to have a Giltinis banner behind you?
No. I'll make an exception.
Well, you can't do that. You've established a precedent here.
I know I'm on thin ice here. I just hope Toronto wins and I don't have to look bad like that.
Steven, what is your take on NOLA being the home ground for the Arrows?
I think it makes sense from a league perspective. I mean, it's a good venue, right? So it looks good. It helps NOLA drive a crowd, perhaps. It makes it a bumper day down there. Perhaps it makes it easier for TV production. So there's a lot of different angles on it that make it make sense. I don't see much difference from LA going to Atlanta and going to New Orleans. I don't see them in similar climates.
Next one up, the Austin Gilgronis, victorious over the Houston SaberCats in the Texas Cup, going into NOLA. So it's a twin bill in NOLA, as they say. Steven, you like twin bills?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a fan, it's a great thing. So back to the game, though. Austin they'll be looking to, keep on moving up. NOLA obviously had a big win against New York 10 days ago, whatever it was. So they'll be looking to capitalize on that. Interesting game.
They stole the win against New York. I'll say it. You don't have to say it.
I disagree with that characterization. They deserve.
Well, this is my show, and I say they stole it. Brian, go ahead.
Well, Nola had a week off, to kind of fix out any problems that they found in that New York game. Did look like a lot. I like Nola at home against Austin, even though I also like Austin. I think they got a couple bumps and bruises. Not sure if Bryce Campbell's back this week or not. Also not sure if Hanno Dirksen is going to make his Major League Rugby debut for Nola. That would be fun to see. But I think Nola looks good early in the season. I'm going with Nola.
See, I love Nola, Nate Osborne, and I'm always rooting for New Orleans, but I think they're sloppy, and I think that they're playing with guys. They don't have the firepower in the back line that they thought they were going to have because of the unfortunate injuries. And I think the Gilgronis could be 3-0 right now. And I think that they've got some very experienced players in that pack. That pack dominated the Sabercats last week. The Wappa, as they call him, he's front and center. And Patty Ryan, despite having a few extra pounds, was getting around the pitch pretty good. And Mason Peterson, he's a force of nature. So I'm going to go with the Gilgronis in this one on the road in a stunning upset of NOLA. San Diego Legion at the Houston Sabercats. This is an interesting one because San Diego's kind of hard to figure, Brian.
Yeah, they're not firing at the moment. Hopefully those guys who had food poisoning problems will all be available again this week. Don't know if Nate Augsburger is going to come in. Obviously, he's a key man, but Houston no points in 2 games. I don't know how you can really pick them even playing at home. So I got to pick San Diego on the road, although, these are both struggling teams at the moment.
Steve, your view of this one as an objective observer?
Yeah, it's a good opportunity. It's another long trip for San Diego, right? But it's an opportunity for them. The only way to get your confidence back is to get right back on the horse, get back out there and get a win. And Houston might be the best possible opposition for them at this particular moment.
I think San Diego, I keep going to the well with San Diego here. I think they're going to go into Houston and win this one easily, to be honest with you. I just don't see. Houston fooled me once, and they're not fooling me again. And until they win again, as John Layfield has said on the show about Toronto, he's never going to pick Toronto until they win. And fortunately, he's wrong. But I'm going to follow that mantra with Houston. That leads us to our next battle, the Seattle Seawolves, another struggling side, playing the Warriors in Utah. Brian, what do you think of this one?
Well, interesting. Seattle just picked up former Utah prop Hula Hula Mungaloa, the ex-Eagles loose head as well. So that helps their front row problems that they have. But Seattle, I didn't see a whole lot of life until the end when James Malcolm came on against LA. They've really struggled. They don't look, certainly don't look like they're headed towards a championship this season. Utah looked pretty good, aside from that 20-minute stretch last week against New England. So I got to go with Utah at home in this one.
But Malcolm had the hat trick, right? Coming in the second half.
He did, yeah.
Just
9 minutes in, and he's got 3 tries.
9 minutes, so over an 80-minute period, that's like 27 tries, Steve. Just put the guy in for the whole game, and it's problem solved. I don't understand. It's not that complicated.
It just doesn't work that way.
Fair enough. I'm going to go with Utah at home. The Warriors have impressed me. They've shown me moxie, they've shown me grit, and they've shown me that they can play 80 minutes of interested rugby. Meanwhile, Seattle is struggling, and they're on the road. And I think Utah is going to smoke them. Finally, Rugby United New York, coming off a bye week, goes into ATL, who are coming off an enormous win over San Diego. Now, New York beat San Diego in Las Vegas, and New York was rusty because they hadn't had any game action. ATL has got a lot of games under their belt, or a lot of rugby under their belt, Brian.
Really interesting match, aside from the LA-Toronto one. This is the one I'm keeping an eye on. And hard to pick. I think a lot of it's going to come down to the game plan that New York pulls out in this one. I hated the game plan they had against NOLA. So if they can kind of revert a little bit and play a little bit more like what we think New York rugby is like, getting a little bit more structure and maybe focus on their set piece a little bit more. I think there's a game to be played here. If they go spin to win like they did against NOLA, I think they'll get beaten by a really hungry and exciting young ATL side. So really difficult match to call. Oh boy. If you put me on the spot, I'm going to go with ATL with the slight upset in this one.
Okay, you'll be having a Rugby United New York banner behind you next week to go along with your Team USA banner. Steve, who's going to win? You're just the general manager of New York. Who's going to win?
The better team. May the better team win.
Diplomatic answer. I'm going to answer for him. New York's going to win this one, and let me tell you why. They're going to win this one because they've had some time to gel. They've had some time to put the shovels down and stop shoveling snow. They've also had some time to rest and to heal, and for the guys to get to know each other a little bit more, to work out who's doing what. I think New York's going to win this one in a squeaker that's not to be missed. How about that, Brian?
I like it. I like it. One of us is going to look slightly less shiny next week.
Well, you know, is it not abundantly obvious that you pick Toronto every week and I pick New York every week? Is it, you know, who's kidding who here?
The players coming back. You got, you know, Saveta's in contention.
Nick Saveta, the 6'12" legend out of Team USA, Notre Dame. All right, so I want to point out that there is this nice thing about talent in Major League Rugby. You've got front rows that I'm looking could be on the radar for Team USA. I know Brian's Team Canada has got some young front rows, as we talked about, but that's the exposure of these players to better players is only going to make them better, and it makes it all better for us as fans. On that note, on behalf of Mr. Bryan Ray of America's Rugby News, Mr. Stephen Lewis of Rugby United New York, I'm Matt McCarthy, and please check out our other segments, including our Major League Rugby show, our Global Rugby Recap, What Are the Odds?, our Major League Rugby Sports Bet show with the Philly Godfather, John Bradshaw Layfield, the WWE legend, and Gifty Bailu, martial law, the Zack Attack, and please sign up for our American Red Cross Rugby Wrap-Up Blood Donor Team.